The best way to learn a language? Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. For instance, I've been using Babbel's convenient courses to help me learn basic conversational skills in German while I'm getting ready for a little trip I'm planning. It's not a language I'd ever studied before, but I find the lessons really easy and kind of like hand-holding me through learning a completely new language to me. And it's reassuring to know that with the help of Babbel, I'll be able to greet people, order food, and ask for directions without having to consult language apps while I'm in Deutschland. I'm still learning. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
As someone who enjoys trying out different makeup looks but doesn't wear a ton on a daily basis, I like to focus on making sure I have high quality staples. And regardless of your makeup routine, you've probably seen Thrive Causemetics Viral Tubing Mascara. I've certainly seen it everywhere. It's in that turquoise tube and it's become my go-to for mascara because it doesn't clump or smudge and it comes off really easily with just water. So that mascara, along with all of Thrive Causemetics beauty products, are certified 100% vegan and cruelty-free. Their bestsellers have thousands of 5-star reviews, and it's easy to see why. Their products are great. I love a multi-purpose makeup product, and their brilliant eye brightener is perfect to use as eyeliner, eyeshadow, even highlighter. I'd recommend using shade Stella for that. They all have a shimmer, and Stella is this really pretty champagne color that looks great on a variety of skin tones. Something I also didn't know from all the mascara videos I saw is that for every product sold, Thrive Causemetics donates either that same product, another product that's needed more, or a monetary donation towards 8 major causes, including those impacted by cancer, domestic abuse, and veteran and education organizations. So refresh your everyday look with Thrive Causemetics. It's beauty that gives back. Right now, you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order at thrivecausemetics.com/thrive. That's Thrive Causemetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/thrive for 20% off your first order.
Hello, and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and this is season 7. The overall topic for this season is how do you solve a problem like Marie Antoinette? And the way we're doing that is through a really meandering route of just looking at what was going on in the world before Marie was born, after her life, like it was such an international time where so many people were traveling from place to place, both because of the slave trade and also trade of goods and also colonialism. And for lots of reasons, a lot of people from different countries were interacting with each other a lot. And so this first part of the season, you might have noticed, we're focusing a lot on America and the American Revolution era. And so you might be like, right, but what does this have to do with today's episode, which is about an Irish brothel owner? And here's the thing. She's connected to Marie Antoinette in ways we're going to get into. She's connected to the American Revolution in ways we're going to get into, because everyone in this world, in this time, no one's very far from a few steps of separation from one another. And I'm so delighted to be bringing you this episode today. Firstly, because it's the story of an Irish woman, and listeners in Ireland have been from day one. Like when I started this podcast in 2019, though I was astonished that people were listening to it from different places, not just Canada and the United States, but especially Ireland has been there. Like I know there's been listeners there from the very beginning. So I'm happy to bring you this story of an Irish person. We have already talked about a person who was born in Ireland, which is Lola Montez, who, as I understand it, well, she can be claimed by anyone. I think Australia is really connected to Lola Montez. She was born in Ireland, though, and I think she's got an Irish sensibility about her as well. And speaking of Lola Montez, so this podcast, we talk about all kinds of different people from different historical time periods and, different vibes to all of them. When I was putting together this season, I posted, I believe it was in the Discord group that we have for people who are members of the Patreon. I was saying, like, because I listen to music while I'm doing my research, and some of the episodes were really like Beyonce's Act 2 Cowboy Carter, like Sally Hemings, who we were just talking about, or Marie Joseph Angelique, just looking at kind of the history or just thinking about these kind of heavier themes of like the history of Black people in America and just all the trials and tribulations in that history. And then there's other episodes where I was listening to Sabrina Carpenter, and this is a That's That Me Espresso story for all of you, because similar to Lola Montez, we also did an episode about a woman known just as Rochelle. Peg Plunkett from today is one of my most favorite kinds of stories to share, which is this story of a chaos, like very sexually liberated, just unhinged woman who was those things. Like there's other people in history who've talked about on this podcast who, for various reasons, they were demonized or vilified, and people said like, oh, this person was actually really trashy, she was really slutty, she was sleeping with everyone, when in fact a lot of these women weren't. That was just what their enemies were saying about them. Think about people like Anne Boleyn. But people like Lola Montez, Rochelle, and now Peg Plunkett, they were fucking all those people. They were having a great time, and these are the stories that I love to share on the show and to celebrate. And I could not have asked for a better guest this week than Karen Moynihan herself. Yes, one of the co-hosts of my most favorite podcast, Double Love, the Sweet Valley High podcast. Karen Moynihan is here with us to help share this Irish story. And honestly, thank goodness, because Peg Plunkett goes to a lot of places, and Karen's here to explain what those places are like. Maybe she's been to some of them. But Karen Moynihan is not only one of my favorite podcasters, the other one being Anna Carey, her co-host from Double Love, the Sweet Valley High podcast. Karen is also one of the many artists that I've worked with to design merch for Vulgar History. So you may not know Karen specifically, but you might be familiar with some of her designs, like Goth Queen Mom Friend, the Mary Shelley shirt, or Goth Queen Superstar, the Claire Claremont shirt, or Don't Stop DeGeezen, the William Cecil motivational poster, the Renaissance Reformation Girl Squad, and our special holiday design, the holiday jumper that says Tits the Season. That's Karen. So this connection between Double Love, the Sweet Valley High podcast, and Vulgar History runs deep. And I'm happy to make it so official here by having her on the show to talk about, honestly, a woman who she first brought to my attention. I had never heard of Peg Plunkett. Karen is all about Peg Plunkett, and I'm just really psyched to share. We've had some heavy episodes this series so far, and I'm just glad to just bring you the story of just like a trashy, slutty woman who's having the best time. Although, she has her struggles too. But this is a fun one. And I do want to also mention that this is part one. How many parts you'll see. But in the finale of this Peg Plunkett mini-series, I am going to announce, because how could we not? Karen and I have schemed together to make an iconic new piece of Vulgar History merchandise themed about Peg Plunkett, and that will be available for purchase, not at the end of this episode, but at the end of the Peg Plunkett series. How many episodes will there be? Wait and see, because we get to talking. So anyway, please enjoy part one of Irish heroine Peg Plunkett. So I'm joined today by Karen Moynihan, who is, I'm going to list three important things that listeners may already know about her. Firstly, she is the designer of, I want to say, 4 different pieces of Vulgar History merchandise.
I think that's right.
Yeah. She's also co-host of Double Love, the Sweet Valley High podcast. And she's also an Irish person. and we're going to be talking about Ireland.
Hooray!
Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
Let me just go through the merch again in my head, because I was trying to think of this, because you did Goth Queen Mom Friend, Mary Shelley, Claire Claremont remix,
Yes,
Goth
that was
Queen,
so fun.
Drama Queen. Then you did the Christmas special.
Oh, yes.
The holiday jumper. Is it Tits the Season, I believe?
Tits the Season, yeah.
Yeah, with a very subtle breast theme.
Had to get the tits in.
Exactly. And then the Renaissance Reformation Girl Squad. That was also you.
Yes, that was. Oh, and Don't Stop Digeesin.
Oh my gosh, that was you too.
Yeah, and the one with the motivational poster was that.
Yeah, you're at least as capable as William Cecil, the motivational poster.
That was
my
it,
God,
William Cecil.
You're the most. I think I've commissioned the most merch from you of any of the artists I work with, and you're also the first Vulgar History merch designer I've had as a guest on the podcast. But most importantly to me, you're the co-host of Double Love podcast, which is where I stole one of your catchphrases that is now one of my catchphrases. Herman, my pills!
A classic. Honestly, the fact that has breached containment from the Sweet Valley sphere just brings me so much joy. I'm so happy.
Well, and I feel like that's what connected me first with you and Anna, as well as fellow podcasters. So we're going to record an after show after this. I'm going to try to stay very on topic for this for the listeners. We're going to talk about Sweet Valley things later on, but I will just say that your podcast, it got me through early pandemic era, just listening to your back catalog. So I feel a strong parasocial friendship with you both.
Love it.
But that's also why the way you talk started permeating my podcast, because I was just listening to your 3-hour episodes constantly.
So long. And it's a lot to get through. And people do listen to them in a huge chunk. And I'm just like, are you guys okay?
They do the same with my podcast as well. People are like, I just caught up. I'm just like, you just caught up to 5 years worth of episodes in
it's
2 weeks? Okay. And then they're mentioning jokes I made. And I'm like, did I say that in 2021? I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it was your podcast. So I think the first time that it permeated through was I said lads in one episode, because I was just like, lad, because I just started thinking like you. I said it and then immediately it felt uncomfortable. I'm like, I shouldn't have done that.
Oh, I think that's fine.
But then I started saying Herman, my pills, because I think when you started saying it, and I was just like, it's just the perfect way to exemplify when a woman is doing something shocking and all of society is just like, Herman, my pills. I'm like, I can't think of any other way to express that. Oh, and you also have your own Herman, my pills merch for Double Love. Yeah. So I've shared that with my listeners, because I would never dare to take your catchphrase and put it on my own merchandise, but you have it there as well.
Well, it's there now, so anyone can grab it.
And the third thing that I've said from your podcast on my podcast, and I pronounced it egregiously, is wrongin. He's a wrongin.
Oh, a wrongin. Yeah.
Wrongin. Mm-hmm. And the story we're telling today has numerous of those. So
it is wall-to-wall wrongins.
Oh my gosh. So the other thing that is also important to mention, the third thing I said about you, is that you're an Irish person. Ireland has been there since, I feel like, day one. Vulgar History listeners, people have been wanting an Irish episode for such a long time. So I know there's listeners in Ireland. And so I'm really happy that I tricked and manipulated you into coming on this episode.
Damn it. There was an ulterior motive here.
There were many motives, but the way that I tricked you into being on the podcast was ages ago. You posted on Instagram, you're like, ask me anything. And I was like, who's your favorite Irish woman from history?
Loaded question, no reason.
Well, and then you answered Peg Plunkett. And I was like, well, who's that? And I looked her up and I was like, oh no. Oh, I need to do this on the podcast. And I need Karen. How on earth had you heard of her?
Oh my God. So it was so many years ago. There was a documentary on television one night, like really late. I was up on my own just watching TV, and it was actually on TG Cahir, which is the Irish language station in Ireland. And it was this documentary called Strípacha, which is the Irish word for sex workers. And it was just about sex workers throughout Irish history. And one episode was about the Georgian era in Dublin. And naturally, they talked about Peg Plunkett. And I was just like, who is this lady? I need to know everything. Because she just sounded so fun and so amazing. And it's just the kind of
social history that you don't often hear about, I feel like, or at the time I certainly didn't. When it comes to Irish history, it's the Rising, it's the Brits, it's all of this, you know? But like there was just this mad, decadent span of time in Georgian Dublin where people were having fun. And she was top of the pile there of people who were having a good time.
Absolutely. Oh, and that's the other thing. I think I'd emailed you about this, but I got a message from, I think it was an Irish American listener who was, again, just like pleading for Irish content on his podcast. But what she said, and I'm curious to know what you think about this, was she feels like the only Irish history that, or women in Irish history that tend to pop up in costume dramas or documentaries or anything, is this kind of like poor, laundry woman, mother of 25, just sort of like, maybe she has a job working as a domestic. Her name is Bridget.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And she was like, there's other Irish women and she would love to know about who they were. And I think she requested Irish queens, but I was like, what about Peg Plunkett?
Oh, yeah.
But is that, like, as an Irish person, like, do you feel like that's a stereotype that comes up?
Oh, it definitely can be. Yeah. I feel like it's getting better now. And there's definitely more of a spotlight being put on the interesting women in Irish history. And even when I say the Rising and all that kind of stuff, I feel like it's only in recent years they've started to delve into the women's stories, because there were obviously women involved in the War of Independence. And for even when I was being taught about it in school, it's all the men, it's all the leaders or all the lads. And it's just like, where are the women? Because they were definitely there. There were gay women, there were women, there were more than just straight men involved in all these historical issues. And I do feel like over the last couple of years, I think it's being improved, that there's more of a spotlight being put on the cool, interesting women from Irish history, for sure.
Yeah, in Ireland, I think, again, a place I dream of visiting. I have not been there myself. But I think it's also, just speaking as a Canadian who's ingested mostly American media, I like, it's sort of like the downstairs people in Titanic, the movie. It's kind of like that. Like Irish people, even when you watch more vaguely contemporary things like Murder, She Wrote, it's always like, well, we live in these little thatched huts and our job is we weave blankets. And it's kind of like, does Ireland have electricity?
Yeah. That is something that people are surprised by when they come here sometimes, that we have electricity and the internet. I recently met some American people in Kerry and they were fascinated by the fact that Ireland had Mexican restaurants. They just completely were blown away by this. And it was just like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know. I don't know another country that's like this, but Ireland, to me, in like pop culture here, it just seems it's kind of like there's like leprechauns and it's like constantly like this Brigadoon like place, which I know is Scotland, but it's kind of like it's always like 1700 there somehow, like a oldie timey village, but like whole country.
Exactly. There are no cities. It's just green fields and tiny villages.
Yeah. Oh, and so this is where, so I was reading, I presume you read the same book I did, Peg Plunkett, Memoirs of a Whore by Julie Peakman.
So what I was working off is, I think it's out of print now, but it's just a pretty much straight print of the memoirs themselves.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I was reading.
I actually bought this after I saw that documentary. I tracked down this book. It was edited by a scholar called Mary Lyons. So she had a little introduction on it, and I think she just tried to tidy up the memoirs themselves as much as she could. But it's pretty much just all Peg's words in this, which is great. So there might be differences now between what I have and what you have in terms of dates and people and stuff. So we can figure it out as we go.
Well, so the book that I read, Peg Plunkett, Memoirs of a Whore by Julie Peakman, who is a historian, and then I was like, oh, I need to read every other book Julie Peakman wrote, because she's a historian of sexuality. So she's all these books just about like, what kind of sex are people having in Georgian England? Like, let's talk about. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like this is a whole new avenue for me. But what she does, and maybe this is where like our two stories will complement each other well, is she was just like, Peg's memory of dates and places is not consistent.
Probably not.
So she did some like digging around to try and figure out like, when was she actually probably born? Like if she was born when she says, then she would have been like 70 years old at this time these men are throwing themselves at her. So she's like, so probably Anyway, so there's some fact checking here as well. But just reading the story, I was just like, oh my goodness. So I don't like Dublin, like you were just saying, Dublin in this Georgian period. It was just like, it was hopping, it was trashy. It was, I mean, Herman My Pills is the only thing I can say.
Big time Herman My Pills energy. It was a nonstop party. And obviously it's still the big divide between rich and poor was horrific. But the rich people were having the best time.
Oh
They
my
really
gosh.
were.
And then there's also, so just so you know, the context of this episode we're recording, it's going to be coming out as part of sort of a series I'm doing about like revolutions of the 18th century, including the American Revolution. And there is so much connection in the story to the American Revolution because all those soldiers were hanging out in Ireland waiting to be deployed to
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So many soldiers, a lot of garrisons, a lot of that going on in Peg's story.
And I mean, unfortunately for her, or fortunately for her, she had a real weakness for a man in uniform.
Oh God. As I was making my own notes for this, I kept just thinking, Peg, you are too horny for your own good. Like, this is just get a grip, girl, please.
Well, and that's where I feel like and please do, like when you notice something that reminds you of Sweet Valley High in this story, like please mention it because it did remind me of Jessica Wakefield a lot, actually.
Oh, now that's the saga they couldn't write because it would just, Herman My Pills all the readers.
But the way that every new man who Peg meets is, I imagine her being like, and it was the most handsome man she'd ever seen.
Yeah,
Like,
this is real love this time. That last time, that didn't mean anything. This is the one.
What I've been trying to I'm so excited to record this. Like I've read the book and I've just been this is why I started the podcast, so I don't just like drive all my friends crazy telling them these stories. But I was just like, you don't understand. You don't understand. Do you know what she just did next? It's like, so I was trying to describe who she is, Peg Plunkett. And I see her as kind of like Lola Montez, who I think Ireland has claimed because
she's born in Sligo. She's ours. Come on.
Yeah. No, I think like, was she born to English parents? Yes. But she was in Ireland, and I think her vibe is Irish.
She's a big chancer, and that's very Irish of her.
Yeah, I'm sure she had the big head.
Big head, big hair, very Irish.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I was like, it's like Lola Montez, but mixed with like Lydia Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. But
okay, yeah.
if Mr. Darcy hadn't written that letter.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I like that.
Like if she ran off with Wickham and then just like, what would she do next? And that's my favorite. Lydia Bennet is my favorite of that. Like, I mean, if you know my podcast, anyone who like, I love a scandalous, trashy, slutty woman.
Oh, yeah.
And Peg Plunkett, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, this is like nonstop.
Yeah. She's just constantly having fun. Like she's just the best party girl. I love her.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So like I have notes, but I'll just kind of go through, which is basically, I could have written 25 pages of notes, but I just sort of was like, I tried to get like dates and places. And that's like every time there's a place name, I would love for you to explain to me what that place is like now and what you know about it. Because I'm just like, never heard of this place, but okay. Sure. So Julie Peakman, who did some forensic work on Peg's, can we tell, I hope this won't, no, I think people need to understand that the memoirs that you read and why she wrote them was, so, and this is part of what I've been terrorizing my friends, telling them facts and information about, is that later in life, Peg Plunkett needed money. So she was like, I'll write my memoirs because it'll make me money, but it'll extra make me money because I'm going to blackmail all the men who visited my brothel, and I'll say I'll put them in the book unless they pay me money. So they're like a blackmail / money making strategy.
Yeah.
And they're in 3 volumes.
There was meant to be a 4th. The 4th one was where she was actually just going to list the names of everyone who still owed her money and hadn't paid her yet. And apparently that was just going to be the most scandalous of all of them because it was literally just going to name the names and be like, this guy and this guy and this guy.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of what Julie Peakman did in her book, because some of them she's like, oh, it's Lord so-and-so. And Julie Peakman is like, I wonder who that was. And so she sort of like figured some of the names. That's where I'm going to bring in some context for you.
Oh, I love it. Okay, great.
But what Julie Peakman figured out is probably Peg was born around 1742. That's what we're looking at.
See, I have 1727, but again, I'm working off what Peg is telling us.
Exactly. And that's like, there's a whole part in the book where Julie Peakman was like, okay, if that's true, then like, her age in all of these situations is interesting, but unexpected.
Yeah. So
we're here to talk about Peg Plunkett, but as an Irish person, I assume you just know these things off the top of your head. So Ireland at this point is the British are there. Ireland was the first British genocidal colonization project. Yes?
Yeah, fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ireland is very much under the rule of England at this point. There is a parliament in Ireland, in Dublin. This is why Dublin is doing so well at the time, because there are MPs around. All of the politicians are either English or they're just like landed gentry. So they're the Protestant descendancy. So they're Anglo-Irish, I would say. But yeah, so there is a lot of prosperity in Dublin at this time because there's all this activity, there's all this trade, and the fact that it is like a political hub as well is just like Dublin's doing great.
And it's the English Protestants are the minority, but they're who's in charge of everything.
Exactly. So there's penal laws here at this time as well. So even though it's majority Catholic country, the Catholics have very few rights. Like they can't vote or anything like that, but they can't own land, or it's like there's all kind of this like tricky land inheritance stuff as well, where like they have to.
I think I have that written down here. It was something like it was something about like Catholic people couldn't then have their children inherit the land. Something like that. Or
it was like if they were to inherit it, it has to be spread between everyone in the family rather than like, say, one son inheriting the farm. He'd have to like convert to Protestantism to be the one in charge of the farm. So it's all kind of set up to dilute any kind of power any Catholics would have, because over the generations, then like the farm is just being lost to all these different people and probably, packed up and sold off in little bits and pieces. So in terms of land ownership, it was probably rare enough for a Catholic family to own their own land and to be in any kind of real position of power.
And now for a quick advertising break.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Seeking the truth never gets old, even when it hides in the shadows. Immerse yourself in the world of June's Journey, a free-to-play hidden object game set in the Roaring 20s. Solve the mystery of the devious gossip spreader and celebrate our 7th anniversary with exclusive events, never-before-seen decorations, thrilling mysteries, and exciting giveaways. The adventure and the gossip awaits. Are you ready for the journey? Download June's Journey today for free on Android or iOS.
People often look at me with confusion when I ask them what their only one in the room story is. They think it has to be like mine, where I went to a 600-person event and discovered that I was the only Black person there. I know. Horrifying, right? Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I am the host and creator of the podcast Only One in the Room. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's only one story. This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone.
I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
We're the Ghost Story Guys.
And every 2 weeks, we explore first-person stories of encounters with the paranormal from all around the world.
Then we have some fun reacting to those stories. We like to say our goal is to scare the hell out of you, then make you laugh.
Belief in the paranormal is not required. All you need is a love of great storytelling and curiosity about the world around you.
Come find the Ghost Story Guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts live, or at ghoststoryguys.com.
And And we're back. And her family was Catholic, so this is all applying to them. So her father, Matthew Plunkett, who, you know what, like all due respect to people with major mental health issues, but he was useless.
Oh my God, so useless. It's like, yeah, come on, dude. Seriously, get it together.
He's just flopping around doing nothing. So Matthew Plunkett, so her mother, who I only know as Miss A. O'Reilly, don't know what A stands for. Wait, what's an Irish name that starts with A? What's that one that's like Aoife?
Aoife.
Aoife. Okay.
Let's call her Aoife.
Her mother, Aoife. So her mother was a distant relation of the Earl of Cavan. So there's like some connection with aristocracy. Like they're not dirt poor, this family.
No. Like it's probably a tenuous enough connection, but like they're doing pretty well for a Catholic family. They're in a nice position for sure.
I do just want to not shout out, but just like I mentioned a minute ago that the British based the colonization of America. Oh no, I didn't say that. So Ireland was the first place that the British were like, oh my God, this place is full of savages. Let's genocide them all and then like move our people in. And then that worked so well for them that they're like, let's do the same thing in America. So like the same people sometimes. So that's so in the process of that. Like 1742, like British people are colonizing America. American Revolution hasn't happened, but so Ireland was kind of the first place that they mastered these techniques. Peg's mother, Aoife,
we've just decided.
Aoife Plunkett, she birthed 22 children.
Yeah. Poor lady. Just, Matthew, get off that woman, seriously.
Matthew could do one thing, and that was impregnate his wife.
Yeah. He's good at one thing, putting babies in that lady.
Oh my gosh, 22 children. But that's also, I feel like that's the stereotype of like and this is like, so stereotypes are often come from actual things.
This is the thing. Yeah. It is just one of those things, unfortunately. Yeah, 22 is too many pregnancies. But yeah, I think only 8 of the children were the ones that survived then. So it's a tough life for Aoife Plunkett.
Yeah, but that's the stereotype of the like Irish ma'am who is just constantly pregnant, too many, and it's like a Catholic thing. Like there's no birth control, but there's also, you're not supposed to want to have birth control or something like that. Like, which we see with Peg later on. I was talking to my friend about this story and she's like, what does she do for birth control? I was like, well, she had a child every year during her years as a sex worker.
Pretty much constantly pregnant.
Irish Catholic. So anyway, so what this is, so they were living in Kilo?
Yeah, it's called Killa now, but the way it's spelled there in like whatever that old spelling is would be more like Killock.
Okay.
Just to keep it real confusing. We can call it Killa, I think, is probably the handiest thing.
Killa. And what do you know about that now? Is it like a lovely rural area? I don't know.
I'm sure it is. I have to say, I had never actually heard of a Killock or a Killa in Westmeath. My Westmeath knowledge probably isn't great. Like Westmeath is in the Midlands. I do have an aunt who lives in Mullingar, which is the bigger kind of town in Westmeath, and it's very nice there. Yeah.
I imagine it's very scenic, very lovely. And Peg, for the most part, because their family had some money, so she was protected from the harsh realities of life outside the country estate, such as the widespread starvation caused by Britain that was happening at this time.
And that wasn't even the Great Famine. That was just another famine that happened earlier in history.
Yeah, so. No, I was like, oh, I've heard of this. I know about the different famine. Oh, okay.
Bonus famine. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is part of why a lot of Irish people were heading to America already at this time, like pre-Titanic era. Just boats full of dancing people.
Just dancing our way across the Atlantic.
My understanding of Irish immigration.
Sure.
I do want to say, like you were here as an Irish person. So, you know, I have nothing but love and adoration for Ireland. And I do have a theory that I am at least part Irish. So I feel some connection with this as well. My connection with Ireland, I'm mostly Scottish. I'm like 97% Scottish. But the one branch of my family were from like the Highlands in Scotland, which is an area where they spoke like Celtic, and they would go back and forth with Ireland a lot. Like they were like, we don't recognize land borders. Like this, we're all Celtic speaking people. Here's Ireland. Here's the Highlands. We just go back and forth. And I'm like, something happened there because I've got a real big head. Like Like, I need to buy men's size X large hats. Like,
Oh,
I
wow.
have
Okay.
the head of Colomini proportionate to the rest of me. So when I heard you on your podcast talking about big Irish heads, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's me. That explains it.
Yeah, we do love Scotland, and yeah, there's a lot of similarities between like Scots Gaelic and Gaeilge, which we'd have here. Like there's a lot of similarities between those two languages for sure. So that would make sense that there'd be a lot of crossing over and intermingling and whatnot.
I like to think so. So I just wanted to say, like, we're here talking about Ireland. So when I make a joke about Ireland, please know I am as Irish as Io Edibiri, at least.
You know what? I'll allow it.
Okay. But actually, that's interesting you mentioned. So, like the language of it all, because no one in this story has an Irish name. Everyone has an English, British name.
Yeah. And again, that's also to do with, I guess, well, the people that we're dealing with are a lot of the Protestant ascendancy. And the Irish language was being, routinely stamped out at this point. So that would go with the names too, and because of, Catholicism being oppressed too, it's like even like mass and being taught, all that kind of education was all being done in secret. So like the hedge schools were all probably around that time as well. So there was no formal, obvious kind of like, we're being super Irish here. And it was just too Catholic, all of it, I think, having the Irish language. So it was all just being kind of swept away as best they could.
Except for her mother, whose name was Aoife.
Who we've just decided is gone there. She was probably Anne, let's be honest.
True. Okay, so Peg, as a child, she was provided with a good education because, again, like she's not a poor person.
No.
She learned music and dance, which would come up later in her later career. This is a quote from Peg's book, as quoted from the book that I read. Life gilded on in the paths of innocence and content.
Oh.
and then Aoife died of spotted fever.
Oh, then it all went so horrifically wrong. Yeah.
She was the glue holding everything together, clearly.
She truly was. Like, without her, everything just goes tits up so quickly. Like, it's a bad time immediately.
So the kids are all shipped off elsewhere. Well, first, initially, just so that they wouldn't catch her disease, except for one brother.
Yes, one brother stayed behind. I think it was the eldest brother at the time had stayed back to look after the mother, but then he also caught the disease and passed away too. So
unfortunately, the second oldest brother, Christopher, all-time villain.
Oh my God. Right? What a piece of shit. This fucking guy.
Christopher, would you say he's a wrong'un or something worse than that?
He's even worse than a wrong'un, I feel like. There can be an element of mischief to a wrong'un, whereas this guy, he's a full-on piece of shit. Yeah.
He's just trash. He's trash. In the context of Sweet Valley High, he's like John Pfeiffer. He's just
exactly. He's that level. Yeah.
Christopher.
Big time boo. Immediate boo. Yeah.
So what happened is the kids were shipped off to various places. The mother died, the oldest brother died, and the father was just like, peace out. I will not do anything for the rest of this story, even though I will live for several more decades.
He lives for so much longer and he's just so pointless. Like, he basically just hands everything over to Christopher, who is now the eldest son. Christopher, absolute monster. So the father just like takes a step back and is like, nope, sorry lads, too depressed. I'm not dealing with any of this. You can all figure it out yourselves. It's terrible.
Matthew impregnated Aoife 22 times.
That he can do.
But it's like, take some responsibility for these children you fathered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Christopher is put in charge, and he was shitty in every imaginable way. He squandered all the family's money. He was miserly about spending money on his siblings. He physically and emotionally abused all of them.
All of them. Like, he starves them. It's horrific. Like, yeah, he's really, really the worst.
Christopher is just, I've been rewatching I, Claudius recently. And Christopher he's like the worst of the Roman emperors.
Yeah, it is this thing. It's like the power, he has the power, and now he's just a complete tyrant, like 100%.
Yeah. And the fact that he squandered the money and he wouldn't spend money on anything where they did have money, but he was just like, no, I'm not going to like feed you.
Yeah. Ugh, stuff.
Christopher's terrible. So understandably, the siblings all tried to escape. Two of the older girls just went away and got married. One of them became Mrs. Brady. The other one, I think, becomes Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Because that's kind of the route out for a young woman.
This is the escape. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, so the one sister who becomes Mrs. Brady, Mr. Brady asked, I don't know her name. What's an Irish name?
Yeah, the sister's Well, again, see, that's Irish, but then you see none of these girls. Well, Margaret is very Irish, I suppose, actually. So there probably might have been a Bridget in the mix, in fairness.
That's Bridget. Do you know there's a podcast called Bad Bridgets that's just
I
about
have heard of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a book as well. Bridget is just like that's just the name of all the Irish women who are all domestic servants in America.
Yeah, it would have been a very popular name at the time.
Well, that's perfect. So Bridget Brady, her sister. So she was like, "Hey, Mr. Brady wants to marry me," and Christopher was like, "No, because I have to give a dowry, and that's money, and I'm Scrooge. I'm the Irish Scrooge."
Just awful. Like, if anything, you'd think he'll just have to make this one-off payment, and then he doesn't have to deal with her or look after her or beat her or starve her. You know, it's saving him energy, you'd think. But no, he just doesn't want anyone to be happy. Yeah.
But luckily, I mean, Bridget had some wits about her, and so she went off to super secret sexily get married to Mr. Brady. Went off to Dublin, and they're like, "Peg, you want to come with?" And Peg is like, "God, yes, please, thank you."
Yes, get me out of here.
Yes. So she's now 15 years old in the big city of Dublin,
Yes.
which is still a big city. But then, like, going from like Killaloch to
Mhm.
Dublin, like, I don't know if she's ever left before. Like, I think it would be, like in the movies of like the young actress arriving in New York City. She's just like, oh
Oh,
wow.
big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dublin was like, for the time, it was the second biggest city, I believe, in like the English UK Great Britain Empire, whatever kind of thing they had going on. It was like the second city, the next one down from London. Like, it was big for the time. Yeah.
And is that because of like ships, like ports, like trade and things like that?
It was partly to do with trade, I would say. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, there was a lot of like, textile trade and all that kind of stuff too.
So Peg, she attracted the attention of many gentlemen, but obviously Christopher wouldn't approve of any of these matches because boo!
Because the worst.
It's not even like he has a plan. I guess his plan is just like, if they all die, I'll have more money. So let's just kill them all.
It's really weird. I don't understand him like at all. Yeah, it's very strange.
Christopher. So anyway, he summoned her home. He treated her horribly. I don't know if this is. Oh no. In a bit, he no. There's a detail, but that's a later visit with Christopher.
Okay.
So anyway, she leaves almost right away to go stay with her other sister, Susan Smith, in Tullamore.
Tullamore, yes, in County Offaly.
Yeah, tell me about Tullamore.
Tullamore. Honestly, all I know about Tullamore is, Tullamore Dew is a whiskey that's made there. So there's a big distillery. And I think actually the sister was married to a guy who set up a brewery in Tullamore. So there was probably a lot of like boozy brewery, distillery stuff going on in Tullamore at the time. I can't imagine it was that big of a town at the time, but Offaly's nice. A lot of bogs there. It's very scenic.
There's a garrison there, which was great for Peg because she loves men in uniform.
She sure does. Yeah, literally. There's soldiers to flirt with. So like whatever kind of a terrible kind of spirits she was in by the time she got to Tullamore, once she was there, she was like, oh, I'm back, baby. This is great.
So she's great. Anyway, and so this just as a detail. So the reason, like, she needed to find a husband because that was her way away from Christopher, because she was too wealthy to become a domestic servant or to become a governess.
Yeah, and she does say herself at one point, I think, in the memoirs that like people would have said to her at certain times in her life, why don't you just go into service? And she's like, with what skills? Like, I don't know how to do anything.
Yeah, so her only option at this point was to find a man to marry, but Christopher was not letting that happen. She was proposed to by an old grocer. I don't know if you noted her description of him.
Mostly that he's ugly and old. I feel like the thing that annoys her the most is that he wears a wig, which I just think is so funny. It's like, that's the worst thing of all, is that he wears a wig.
Yeah, she preferred the shorter hair of a soldier.
Imagine.
Well, I feel like this is in the time period where they wouldn't have short hair necessarily, but like, like the little ponytail. I think that would be
exactly
the look.
Yeah. And it is funny because I guess when you see like period dramas and stuff set in this kind of era, and you look at the guys in their big curly periwigs, and you're kind of like, God, did anyone actually find that attractive? And now we have evidence that no, they didn't.
No,
girls were not into that.
She was not. Yeah. So this old grocer wanted to marry her. She turned him down. And instead, she ran off with this other guy, some hot guy.
Man of business. Unnamed man of business.
That's what I've written down as well. Man of business.
That's how he's described. Yeah, he used to work for this woman's husband. The husband died, so he now lives with this widow, Mrs. Shannon, and conducts her business. But as Peg puts it in her memoirs, so the widow Shannon had made him master of the business and of herself.
Yeah, so
Very saucy.
she's just I'm going to describe as polyamory of
Sure.
everybody.
Yeah.
In this story, like people, you're married but you have a lover, or you're not married but you live with someone, and then also you have a lover, and your lover has a lover, and it's just like, oh, and that lover is lover with that other lover. It's just everyone's just fucking.
It's very chill. Yeah.
That's the vibe. She has some quotes that you might have saved as well later on, where she's just like, yeah, free love, it's cool, whatever.
Yeah. She's very it's kind of sex positive in that respect, and good for her.
I will say the biographer, Julie Peakman, is a bit judgmental at times with Peg's poor judgment. Where it's like, she's 15 and she's horny. So like...
Exactly. She's so horny. Oh God, Peg.
She is. But I mean, she's been so like, not necessarily sheltered, but just like living in this little country house, and suddenly she's surrounded by handsome men. Like,
this is it. And like, if she goes home, all she has there waiting for her is a fucking horrible time with Christopher, who's just going to beat her up for no reason. So it's like, of course she's out here flirting and like, get me out of here, lads. Someone help me out.
Yeah. So she took off with this guy, the man of business. They went to Kilbeggan. Have you heard of that? Is that a
I have
place?
Not heard of Kilbeggan. I looked it up, and I just saw that it's kind of close to the border between Offaly and Westmeath. So I think they were heading for Mullingar was the plan, but they had to stop to rest the horses at one point.
Kilbeggan has a real Hobbit, Lord of the Rings place name look to it.
Yeah. Well, Kill is a very common prefix for towns in Ireland, because the Irish for church at the time would have been Kill, like Cill.
Okay,
so it was all anglicised. So it's just like church of whatever is just, that's the townland. But yeah, Kilbeggan. Yeah. I hadn't actually heard of it, I have to say, but yeah.
No, but so explain what happens. They had to stop there to rest the horses, and then...
Literally like 15 minutes after they get to the inn, I think, it's Mr. Smith, the brother-in-law, and two friends of his, like, kick the door down and come in to, like, drag Peg home. They've got pistols. They're threatening to shoot her if she doesn't come with them. It sounds super dramatic. And Mr. Business just jumps out the fucking window as soon as they turn up. So he's absolutely no help whatsoever. At the first sign of any kind of struggle, he's like, nope, see you, Peg. Gone.
Yeah. And then they take her back to Christopher.
Oh, God.
And this is the point I was thinking about. This is where Christopher beats her up so badly she vomited blood, and it took her 3 months of bed rest to recover.
Yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah. So when we say like Christopher, boo, it's like, boo! Like,
honestly, boo. Like, yuck. I hate that guy so much.
Oh my God, Christopher, like all-time villain on this podcast, for sure.
Truly. A completely irredeemable character, like just... the worst. Yeah.
Just for no reason. Like, he's like a cartoon villain. He just like is evil.
He truly is. Yeah. Like literally got the bit of power and just went completely balls out evil. He's just, I hate him.
Yeah, he's terrible. So, as it was described in this biography, as soon as she could stand, she hired a carriage and left.
Yes. Good for you, Peg. Get the hell out of there.
Yeah. And she went back to Dublin to hang out with Bridget. And that's where she met Mr. Dardis.
Oh, Mr. Dardis. Oh, yes. So he's a friend of another brother-in-law. So this is Brady, I think, then?
Yeah, this is the Bradys, yeah.
Yeah. So Dardis is a close friend of the brother-in-law. And yeah, of course, like as soon as she's still not fully well, because it was literally as soon as she could sit upright, she was gone. So she still has a bit of recovery time ahead of her. So he was really nice to her while she was getting better, and she was vulnerable, and he was lovely. But of course, as soon as she's well enough to do more than sit up, they're sneaking around.
Which is what it was described in this one as like, he acted the role of the gentleman suitor by day.
But
by night, they were sneaking around.
Definitely.
And then, but he's the sort of guy who, and this did happen in one of the Sweet Valley sagas, the Fowler's saga, to one of Lila Fowler's ancestors, where he claimed that he was going to marry her, so they might as well have sex.
That old trick. Oh,
and then he did not marry her.
Yeah, God. There is a great line from Peg, though, where she says, I think at the point that they did start sleeping together, where she says, how could I call him seducer when I met the seduction halfway? Because again, too horny for her own good.
Yeah. Yeah. So she became pregnant. Like, she's from fertile stock.
Get used to this, Peg.
So Mr. Dardis, who he sucks. I don't
Ugh.
think he's not cool enough to be a wrong'un. He's just no.
He's just lame. It's just, get out of here, Jardis. Yeah, because she's pregnant and he's just like, yeah, actually, I can't marry you because, it'll ruin my reputation and I can't do that and lose my inheritance. No, it's absolutely not.
Yeah. So then what he does is he arranges for Peg to go live in lodgings until she had the baby. Now, there was some stuff, because there was some context in the book I read. It was talking about like the Foundlings Hospital and stuff. So like women having babies and then dropping them off was like a thing that happened all the time, to the point that there was some sort of revolving door type situation where you could just put the baby in and they would just like, whoop, oh, a baby. Like,
Yeah. There was a church where you could do that. St. Odin's Church, I think you could. There was like a little bit that you could put a baby in and it would just spin around to put the baby inside the church. And it's like, there you go. There's your baby now.
Like, this happened enough that they invented the turntable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like a lazy Susan for babies.
Yeah. So I presume that was kind of the plan. It's like, okay, just go off there, have the baby, put it in the turntable, and then we'll resume. But it turns out that the place where he set her up was owned. It wasn't a brothel, but it was owned by, like, all the other tenants were sex workers or something like that.
Yeah, I guess it was a house where, the lady that ran the house maybe didn't have the best reputation, or it was just that she was known for boarding sex workers. So maybe it was just the fact that she didn't have a problem with someone being a sex worker staying in her house. But it wasn't a brothel necessarily. It was just, I guess as houses go, it wouldn't have had the most sparkly of reputations.
Well, and as evidenced by when her brother-in-law, Mr. Smith, tracked down the coachman who brought her there. The detail was like, well, he knew that it was a left-handed coachman. So he was looking around to be
this guy's Sherlocking around the place. Like,
how many left-handed coachmen are there in Dublin? And I'll talk to all of them. So he found it down. Anyway,
he did the legwork.
But then he was like, oh no, she's living there? Ugh, you're left for dead. Like, she had fallen too far for him to save by living in this building.
Yeah, rude.
Like, listeners, please know, like, this podcast is going to go on for quite a while, and Peg thrives for almost all of it. This is just backstory.
Actually, we're so early in her story. She's still, 15, 16? I don't know.
Yeah, like, there's tragic things happening to her, but this is not, what's that book? Test of the D'Urbervilles. It's not, it's not just like things are bad and then things get great. But so just hold on. So we're going to leave you there, bit of a cliffhanger, because this is a long story and I want us to all be able to sit with and appreciate all of the bananas things that we've been hearing about. Next week, Peg Plunkett Part 2. Is that going to be the last part? No, it's not, because this story is epic. It's such a saga, and I had so much fun talking with Karen about it. And if you want to hear me and Karen talking some more about other things, talking about Sweet Valley High, talking about the strange connection that I've forged between her podcast and my podcast, or just getting some more information about Irish history, I did record an episode of The After Show, which is a Patreon exclusive spin-off podcast to Vulgar History. So if you join the Patreon for at least $5 or more a month, you can get access to bonus. We have a lot to say, and I diverted a bunch of it to the after show just so we could try and stay on topic as much as possible for two talkative people like her and me here in the main feed of Vulgar History. Yeah, so next week, more Peg. You're like, I can't even, prepare yourself. This is it's such a saga, and I'm so delighted to be sharing this on the podcast, because this is just the sort of story I love to find. And it's the sort of story I only find when somebody else mentions it to me, because these people exist. They're out there in the history of so many countries, just these bananas people who led these fantastically interesting lives. And, more people need to know about them. And now a bunch more people know about Peg Plunkett because of this episode. So yeah, stay tuned next week for that. And then stay tuned whenever the Peg Plunkett saga ends for the reveal of the new Karen Moynihan Vulgar History merch design inspired by Peg Plunkett. And if you want to keep up with me and the podcast until then, I mentioned the Patreon. So I'm posting more stuff there. So you can join the Patreon as a paid member. For if you pledge at least $1 or more per month, you get early ad-free access to all the episodes. So if you're just like, I can't wait to hear what happens with Peg, like the episodes, they drop there like 4 days early. So, a bit of a shorter wait for you. And then if you pledge at least $5 or more a month on Patreon, you get access to the bonus episodes. So that is the after show, like the extra bonus thing I recorded with Karen, as well as we do episodes of Vulgar Piece Theater, where I talk about costume dramas. And also there's a series called So This Asshole, where I talk about gross men from history. You can also join the Patreon for free for $0. And I post stuff there like a couple times a week is what I'm working on doing, is just kind of like, historical stuff that's in the news, or just some value-added content about the various episodes. So you can just join the Patreon for free just to keep up with me. And one of the reasons I'm doing that, like I'm posting more free stuff on Patreon too, is just because I tend to post a lot of my stuff on Instagram, which is a great way, and that's how I've connected with so many people. And just the algorithms are not loving me lately. A lot of the stuff I post there is not being seen by as many people as are following me there and who want to see this stuff. So if you join the Patreon, you'll get alerted every time I post something. So anyway, patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. And we have a glorious brand partner, Common Era Jewelry. If Peg Plunkett was around now, or if Common Era Jewelry was around then, I think she would have been all about these designs, because they're all about women from history, often scandalous women from history. So Common Era Jewelry is small business. It's a woman-owned business, and they make beautiful jewelry designs that are inspired by women from history as well as women from mythology. There's not a Peg Plunkett design. I'm going to say she's not famous enough for that yet, but there is an Anne Boleyn design. There's other people who are seen as scandalous from history, like Cleopatra, Agrippina, Boudica, people who are seen as scandalous from mythology, like Clytemnestra, Aphrodite, Medusa. And so she has a whole collection called Difficult Women, which is just kind of about women who had bad reputations from history. And basically, it's beautiful. I love these pieces. And Vulgar History listeners can get 15% off your purchase at Common Era by going to commonera.com/vulgar or using code vulgar at checkout. I keep mentioning the merch. So there is Peg Plunkett merch, not there yet. Other merch is there. So if you want to just like represent your love of vulgar history, go to vulgarhistory.com/store to find our merchandise there. Or if you're outside the US, you can use our Redbubble shop, which is vulgarhistory.redbubble.com, where we have all of the Karen Moynihan designs thus far, as well as there's a Lola Montez design there, all designed by fabulous artists who I've partnered with. And so, yeah, you can just support this podcast with like strange inside jokes that no one else seeing them would understand. Or if someone does see them and understand, then you made a new friend, because that's another member of the Tits Out Brigade, which is what listeners of the show are called. You can get in touch with me, thoughts, comments, whatever, ideas of like scandalous people to talk about on the show, because I will drop everything when I find out about a trashy, slutty woman from history. It is my weakness. A couple seasons ago, everything was upended. First, when I heard about Hortense Mancini, then I heard about Lola Montez. Like, I was already working on this Marie Antoinette season, and then I'm just like, Peg Plunkett is going to be in this season. God damn it. And it turns out that she connects with so many things so well. But like, that's my weakness. So let me know if you know about somebody like that from history. You can email me. There's a form on my website, vulgarhistory.com. You can email me at vulgarhistorypod@gmail.com as well. And I am on Instagram at vulgarhistorypod. So next week, Peg Plunkett Part 2. Like, get your tits ready. It's such a saga. There'll be more with Karen next week as well. Listen to her podcast that she co-hosts with Anna Carey, Double Love, the Sweet Valley High podcast. It's incredibly fun. It's my favorite thing. And until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, written, and hosted by Ann Foster. That's me. The editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severn Duo. The Vulgar History show image is by Deborah Wong. Transcripts are written by Aveline Malik. Find transcripts of recent episodes at vulgarhistory.com.
Welcome to the small town of Chinook, where faith runs deep and secrets run deeper. In this new thriller, religion and crime collide, when a gruesome murder rocks the isolated Montana community. Everyone is quick to point their fingers at a drug-addicted teenager, but local deputy Ruth Vogel isn't convinced. She suspects connections to a powerful religious group. Enter federal agent V.B. Laureau, who has been investigating a local church for possible criminal activity. The pair form an unlikely partnership to catch the killer, unearthing secrets that leave Ruth torn between her duty to the law, her religious convictions, and her very own family. But something more sinister than murder is afoot, and someone is watching Ruth.
Chinook, starring Kelly Marie Tran and Sanaa Lathan. Listen to Chinook wherever you get your podcasts.
With your long-forgotten name, we call upon you. We call upon you. In the words of the unspeakable language, we call upon you. We call upon you. By the spilt blood of the wicked, who walk upon this world, sprouting the words of false idols, we call upon you. We call upon you. On the land of the dead harvest, that which brings the earth itself into your service, Yamal, we call upon you. We call upon you. We call upon you. We call upon you. Yamal calls upon you.
The Sprouting, a Call of Cthulhu actual play podcast by Blighthouse Studio. Find us on your podcatcher of choice.